Oh, shit. My soul longs for your salvation. I hope in your word. My eyes long for your promise. I ask, when will you comfort me? For I have become like the wineskin in smoke, yet I have not forgotten your statuses. How long must your servant endure? When will judgment come to those who persecute me? The insolent have dug pitfalls for me. They do not live according to your law. All your commandments, they are sure. All your commandments are sure. They persecute me with falsehood. Help me. Help me. They have almost made an end of me on earth, but I have not forsaken your precepts. Your precepts. In your steadfast love, give me life, that I may keep these testimonies of your mouth. Hello, everybody. Let's begin this deep dive. I've got, well, quite a mix of source material for you, for you today. Everything from dense academic to legal docs, philosophy, and some really specific personal records. So, first, there's the historical foundation. How the U.S. is framed in the source material that I found, it's quoted as the settler colonial state. The second I'm calling the more modern, I'm calling the more psychological strategy for maintaining, I'm calling the more psychological strategy for maintaining control, which the material, and the second is a more modern psychological strategy, maintaining control, which I call the 10th power. So my mission here is basically to give the one and all, from the one and know, tools, intellectual armor, maybe to be able to see both sides of the coin here. Two sides, same coin. The physical foundation, how the system was built, and let's say, philosophical maintenance plans, the ones that are running today even. I'm looking at the rules of the game. So, tracing the lineage of control. Okay, so let's start here at the beginning. This historical argument, the source, pushes back against. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. The historical argument. I really push back hard here against the standard U.S. origin story, so be ready. I argue it was conceived as a settler colonial state, but I stress that this is an fundamentally different perspective than just regular colonialization, okay? Than regular colonization. Why is distinction so important in my view? Well, what's the difference, right? Well, traditional colonization, it's often about extraction, right? taking resources, maybe governing the locals, sending wealth back home. But the settler colonialism, colonialism, whatever you want to say, according to these things that I've found out, it has a primary goal: eliminate the indigenous people, specifically, clear the land, make it permanently available for settlers. The settlers become the new nation. So, replacement, not just ruling over people or taking stuff. Replacement. That's why the sources here I'm using, I hope, provide stark language in your frequency. I'm calling this, a U.S. crime scene, basically. This is a U.S. crime scene, basically. And historians like Roxanne Dinar Ortiz are presented as, well, forensic scientists putting together that, foundational act. It's probably uncomfortable to think about, but how did I rationalize that? But how did I rationalize this? Maybe even with people today. It seems to be through this almost an unconscious manifest destiny, which, was built on top of this legal idea called Turnalius. Turnalius. Tronelius. Empty land, basically. Literally land without people. It was the kind of necessary psychological and legal starting point. This. I want to point out how deep this runs. Even something like Woody Guthrie. This land is your land. This land is my land. But it wasn't vacant when it was found. If the land wasn't empty, what legal tool did I, use to justify? Well, taking it from the people who already lived here. Let's talk about Indian giving. We didn't even give it back. Okay, so that brings me to something called this doctrine of discovery. And this isn't just some dusty old idea. And I'd like to insist it's a key legal principle that still impacts U.S. law. Doctrines of discovery, where do they come from? Well, it started back in the 15th century with Pepperpole. Well, it started in the 15th century with papal bulls, decrees from the Pope, basically. Christian kings, the green light. Giving Christians. God damn it. Giving Christian kings the green light to claim lands held by non-Christians. From the Pope. And how did that end up in American law? So, through a Supreme Court case in 1823, Johnson versus McIntosh. Johnson versus McIntosh. It essentially took that old religious doctrine and it baked it into U.S. law. Smell what's cooking in this kit. Are you smelling what's cooking yet in the kitchen? So, through the Supreme Court case, right, it argued that indigenous peoples' rights to complete sovereignty, well, were necessarily. It argued that indigenous peoples' rights to complete sovereignty were necessarily diminished. Basically, it stripped them of their full sovereignty, refined them as domestic dependent nations, and it was the legal cover needed to whole replacement this project. And yet I really fight against the idea that these were just free lands or empty wilderness. I describe something very different here, right? I paint a picture of really sophisticated societies here. These notes that were found, these PDF files, they paint a really sophisticated society with managed landscapes, huge agricultural output, a huge output. It paints a picture of really sophisticated societies, managed landscapes, huge architectural output. Think Iroquois cornfields. Think Iroquois cornfields, covering 6 square miles around just one village. Advanced techniques. They managed these landscapes like not wild. Yeah. The controlled burns, resource management, creating what I call a real Tivoli disease. Oh, damn it. It's a relatively, what I call relatively disease-free paradise. Controlled burns and resource management, creating basically disease-free paradise because of this. Extensive road systems too. Oh no, not because of it. I saw the connecting huge distances. Alaska down to South. There was controlled burns, resource management, creating disease-free paradise, basically. Extensive road systems. There was talk of huge distances like Alaska roads down to Central America. High levels of hygiene are mentioned. Bathing, sweat lodges. The point being made is that we're not primitive cultures in needing rescue. They were but portraying. This is fucking